Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, in this case with a very sad news, the death of this 12-year-old little boy. Probably heard about it, Archie Battersby, 12-year-old. This boy was perfectly healthy, and this is something else to keep in mind. What are your children watching online? Be careful with that. This little boy was watching a challenge, one of these nonsense in online about wrapping something around his, choking something about around his neck. He was perfectly healthy. All of a sudden, his mother goes and checks in his room, and he had something that was, suffocating him. Hospital, brain damage, and finally, NHS decides that the best thing for him is to simply die. Which is the reason why I'm doing this video. This is more of the advanced level of preparedness, the idea of having options from a legal point of view. We live in a world where these things are more important now than ever. This is the stuff that I cover in Bugging Out and Relocating. Now, this is a book that's not as popular as my other books. Those would be Street Survival Skills and Surviving the Economic Collapse, which I talk about all the time in my videos. Now, this one, I don't mention as much. It's really not all as popular as the other ones because it talks about some topics that are something that people are really maybe not all that comfortable with. The idea of really bugging out, of leaving behind everything if you have to do that. Now, I make the case in that book about, that may be the case, but also the idea of evacuating if you need it. So those are the 2 points of that book. Bugging out is something that people are somewhat more open to. There's something, a flood, a fire, some disaster, some form. Yeah, the idea of a bug-out bag is not as hard. Now, relocating entirely is something that a lot of people are not even willing to contemplate because it's just too much. This is more of the advanced level of preparedness that I try to mention and include in my channel every once in a while. And a very important part of that is a second citizenship, a second passport, right? If you have a second passport, you have options, and those options are endless. They truly are. There's no limit to the possibilities in which that may make a huge difference in your life. You just cannot comprehend how important it is until you actually need it and the question pops up. Do you have one? Can you travel as a citizen elsewhere? Can you appeal? Well, in the case of this little boy, he couldn't. His family actually tried to appeal to the European court. But of course, UK is no longer part of the European Union. What are you going to be applying to the European court for? You cannot apply to the European Union court if you're no longer part of the European Union. Keep that in mind. Maybe that was something that people were not all that aware of when they were thinking about making certain decisions. Now, the NHS is unfortunately known for prioritizing budget rather than lives. And this is not an opinion of mine. Cases are overwhelming. These are maybe some of the more tragic ones, but this happens all the time. The amount of time that people have been sent back home with a lump or something under the skin only to just be told to come back a few months later and then be told, well, it's just too late. Now you have to just die with dignity, which is a phrase that they seem to like a lot. Well, the die with dignity thing is very convenient so as to not give treatment to people that actually need it. Now, this is not me, making up bullshit or fake news or making up hoaxes, and which seems to be a popular thing these days. No, this actually happened not that long ago, and it was something that I mentioned in previous videos as well. The case of Tafida Requib, this girl that for different reasons she had a blood vessel burst, and she suffered. She went to sleep, and that vessel ruptured, and she suffered brain damage again. And she was told by the NHS that the best thing to do would be to let her die with dignity.
All doctors agree that Tafida can't be cured. So while those in England argue she should be able to die with dignity, the Italian system puts more emphasis on the sanctity of life.
Doctors here disagree with the charge that this transfer was undignified and even cruel.
As a doctor, to read a lot of time the word futile. Because for us, speaking futile or using that word means that you always have to get a success for medicine. It's not probably that the point. I mean, it's not always, we are not always able to treat and to solve the problems, but we definitely have to be able to take care.
Tafida's
That
parents...
is, whenever you see some of these anti-Italian clips, and you see quite a bit of those in the American media and UK as well. In Family Guy, they portray Italians like brute, stupid people, blah blah blah, that like they don't even know how to speak. It's probably more about ignorance than actual real knowledge. These are the people that saved this girl's life. Instead of letting her die. Italy is quite an impressive place. You actually should visit. It's pretty interesting, going back to a culture 2,000 years ago that even these days puts what we have these days to shame all over the world. Anyway, back to the topic. The idea that she would have died in her country, in UK, but because she had the option of being treated, the appeal was made, right? And this is what ended up happening.
Doctors in London and Italy both agree that there is very little chance of Tafida's condition improving. But her parents have been assured that were she to move to Italy, her life support treatment would not be withdrawn. Tafida's parents say they have the funding to pay for her treatment, and it's the refusal of Bart's NHS Trust to allow Tafida to travel, which is illegal under European law.
Do you understand what this man just said? The NHS is saying that she will not. They would be against her interest to not let her travel because her condition is so bad. But the European law that is superseding that, at least when that was still the case, said you can't do that. If this girl wants to get treatment elsewhere, you cannot ban her from doing that. You cannot stop her from getting treatment elsewhere if she wants.
Tafida could live for at least another decade, even in her current state. Her parents believe there's a chance her health might improve if she gets the care she needs. The hearing into Tafida's fate continues throughout this week.
Now, this is no longer a case. You're no longer part of the European Union. You don't have this option. Now, if you do have another passport, if you have another citizenship, you may be able to make an appeal, and that appeal is it's a completely different situation when you do have the right to appeal to get treatment elsewhere because you have that second passport. It would have been very different for this boy. Maybe he would have lived more, maybe not. Now, in the case of this girl, we don't have to guess anything. We can actually check because, this is the power of the internet. We can actually go and check for ourselves. And this is what this girl has to say now.
I am Tafida Ragib. When I was little, I was happy, bubbly, and enjoyed simply everything. I loved spending time with my cousins.
She's talking. She's alive.
My parents were confused and shocked and in disbelief as to what happened to me. I was dying. Next several months were challenging for me. Normal life. Please don't give up on us, and I promise as you try for us, we will.
So this little girl, which the NHS said that the best thing for her was to just die with dignity, is now awake. She's alive, and she's obviously speaking with, I would say, no impairment whatsoever. She's speaking pretty much normally. Do you see how different this would have been if she hadn't been able to make that appeal and die with dignity as the NHS went? I know what the hell it is with the NHS. They do have these things about prioritizing saving money over lives. They're very well known for this. This is just one more example, and you have countless examples. You hear about this all the time. The stories never end about how everything is just disregarded, and then when you need treatment, it's just too late. You could spend all day reading about stories like that. So here's where this thing is important. The idea of having another passport, another citizenship. It's not just about healthcare, guys. It may be, something completely, and this isn't a story I read anywhere. This is something I was told. This is something I saw with my own eyes. I was in a hospital once waiting for an appointment for some checkup or whatever, or maybe I was with one of my kids with a fever or anything, something that was not important. I saw a couple of Americans, East Coast Americans, pretty well off based on how they were dressed. They were tourists, of course, and they were crying. These couple of older Americans were crying because they had just been informed that they need a treatment, and the treatment they would be getting for one of them was something that they could actually afford, unlike the budget that they had in America. So they could not afford a treatment in their own country, in the United States. They could afford it somewhere else, in Europe, right? In one of these, horrible European countries that so many Americans like to mock. They were crying like little children, older adults, man and woman. And she kept on telling the lady at the desk, do you know how much this costs? We couldn't afford this in our own country. And here, you're telling me we can pay for this? This is the total. And the woman, yeah, lady, that's, and this is a private clinic. It's not, so in a private clinic, the price was completely different, of course, much cheaper, and they could afford it. And yet, this is just one more example. Let's suppose there's something involving education. Your options are, of course, better if you have more options. If you can afford to study in another country, well, maybe that's an option you consider. And usually that's the case, especially in the United States, with universities being quite expensive. Maybe studying abroad, it's an option, and you could do that without a passport. The thing is, with a passport from certain countries, it may be a lot cheaper than if you just do it as a foreigner. You just drop by and say, yeah, I want to study here. Sure, it's going to be costing you this much. Now, if you're a citizen, the price is considerably lower. It may be lower as zero. It may be that much of a big deal. So your kid's going to college or not going to college, your kid being alive or being dead. And it goes on and on in terms of financial assets, security for yourself, legally speaking. Even if something like simple as traveling. Let's say you have to travel and you only have one passport. Well, let's say you're a Russian guy and you have to travel. Last year you didn't have a problem. All of a sudden now, no, you're not welcome anymore. Why? Because your passport says you're Russian. You're not allowed to come into many countries now with a Russian passport. There's actually a lot of restriction with that at this moment. So you don't know what your country may end up getting involved in the future. The option of saying, I have this other citizenship. This is perfectly valid. I have 2 citizenships. Yes, that's perfectly legal, and some countries have restrictions depending on what second citizenship you apply on, but usually in general, yeah, perfectly legal, and you just wipe your second you just bring your second passport out, and gives you more options. In terms of traveling, it may be a lot more, sometimes you don't even need a visa depending on the kind of passports that you have. In terms of having a second residence, for holidays, for traveling, for opening your cultural appreciation of the world, or having a bug out location offshore in some other country in case things get really bad for whatever reason, wherever it is that you are. My point is, you don't understand how important having that second passport is. Having a second citizenship is a huge deal. This is the more advanced level of preparedness, but man, it is important. It's actually one of the things when you talk with people that have gone through tough stuff in life, usually they that's one of the things. When it really goes to hell and your option is no longer being there, which is the title actually of the subtitle, what to do when staying is not an option. Well, when staying is not an option and you have to look at that other possibility, that is massive. That is huge. And I've had people over the years that send me messages. Yeah, you know what? I listened to what you said. I looked into it. I got this citizenship. I have now my Irish citizenship because of my Irish, father or grandfather, whatever. I think you can even go down to grandfather for Irish citizenship. It depends on each country. But for people that do it, they don't even know how powerful that can be. Not only for them, they can pass this down in generations. So their kids and their grandkids may get that citizenship thanks to them. And you just don't know how useful that may end up being in the future. You just have no idea. Anyway, guys, that's the topic of this video. Very sad to learn about this poor boy's passing, but I just want to talk about this topic because these things remind us of how important all of this is. See you in our next video. Take care.